Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. Nate Collins is a former CEO who managed a successful exit to a large PE-backed media company. He now works with a limited number of business owners, CEOs, and their families to help ensure that they are achieving their financial goals. As a financial advisor and certified exit planning advisor, he provides in-depth tax mitigation and estate planning strategies, as well as financial planning and investment management. Nate helps owners understand exit readiness and options, wealth transfer, gain family alignment, and prepare for life after exit. And folks, that piece on life after exit, one of the many reasons, in addition to his expertise and his deal experience, is his particular journey on life after exit, which aligns with some of the things I've been wanting to highlight on this podcast for founders. So he's going to talk about that as well. Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Corey. It's really great to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
So, Nate, I want to get into all that. Like I said, we want to talk about the deal. We want to talk about post-exit. We want to talk about what inspired you to do what you do now and what you do now. But before we get to any of that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing certainly, I don't know, obviously in the beginning of your adult years, you weren't thinking about doing what you're doing now. And even with regard to your prior company, I'm guessing at a young age, that probably wasn't it. But you tell me.
No, when I was 10 or 12, that definitely was not on my mind. I was pretty sure I was going to be in the NFL and then the NBA and then an MLB professional, of course, being only 5'9", some of those and 170 pounds. A couple of those professional leagues were out of my range, but and then I was going to go into construction or be a handyman like my dad, because that's what you do when you're a kid. You just want to grow up and be your dad or just, make him proud. I hope I've achieved that. I've done a lot of things, but yeah, none of that was running an international licensing company, which is the company that I sold in 2019, or now working with entrepreneurs and executives as they grow their businesses and transition into their next chapters.
Yeah, that was not right. So I'm curious as to, you mentioned NFL, NBA, MLB. Were those sequential, or were you thinking you would be the next Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders, multi-sport athlete?
It was pretty sequential. I was at least wise enough to understand that you can only play a few years in the NFL. NFL is standing for not for long, and then your body gets beat up. And then of course I was going to be in the NBA because it was most similar to the NFL, and I could do a couple years with my knees. And then when I was completely beat up, then I could go play MLB. Of course, any baseball player here is probably saying that's not true. You get beat up in baseball too. Yeah. And I'm sure you're right. So that's just the thoughts of a kid.
I love it. Let's talk about even how you got to, well, actually, my other question I was asking in the beginning is, what was your first deal of any type? It could be something when you were, already in business, or maybe something you think of as a kid, anything you consider a deal.
I guess my first deal was actually buying into that company that I took over in 2011.
Yeah.
It was a privately held business owned by, I would say, 16 different families and non-professional investors. Most of everybody had received their equity stake from previous generations. It had been handed down, and my mother owned some from her mother, and some shares came up for sale. And my mother said, hey, you need to buy into this company. And I got to say, I wasn't a professional investor at that time. And had I actually looked at it from a professional investor's lens, I would have said, no way, this is crazy. It is so mismanaged. We're not getting dividends. It's being run like a family business. The CEO is getting an insane salary for the size of the business. Basically, it was a non-transferable company. But I didn't know that. And I didn't really know what a non-transferable company was at that time. And I just trusted my mother, and it really wasn't very expensive. And so I bought into it. And then, let's see, maybe 8 years later, we had to fire the CEO, and I kind of strong armed my way into leadership of that business and took it over. That was the beginning of my, I guess, CEO journey, which lasted 8 years, 9 years. With a lot of luck and a lot of perspiration, we were able to transform that company from a family-run style business, very musty and dusty, something they hadn't really been putting money back into the business. They'd been picking the fruit without watering the tree.
Yeah.
And we just spent a lot of time and effort, rebuilt the team. I think within that 8 years, I had about a 97% attrition rate. We ended up with a very dynamic team, grew the company, probably was the most interesting company in the space, a very niche space. And then we ended up selling for an incredibly high multiple for that type of business.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's so much in that. So I want to go back and hit a few things. One is, it's funny. I had a partner, still a good friend. A while back, we put together some real estate investment funds, and we were buying up some multifamily. We did some condo conversions on small buildings and things like that. And I remember, like, we would look through so many deals, right? And listen, if you look at any professional investors, right, the percentage of deals they invest in compared to what they, review, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in, venture, whether it's in PE, whatever, even sophisticated angels, it's a tiny percentage, right? But we would see these folks who were not professionals, right? Who didn't do analysis, who were, whatever it was. They were handyman, they were construction people, they were whatever, and they'd see a building and the numbers, nothing. It was similar to what you would say. Like, if you really looked at it from professional level, it made no sense to invest in. It would be the deal that we would turn down as somebody with a professional eye. But meanwhile, they'd make it work and be successful at it, right? And it sort of made us wonder sometimes, like, are we too smart for our own good, quote unquote, sometimes? Like, do we overanalyze, some of this stuff? So it's always an interesting question. But I think it also is, I mean, some of it could be timing, but a lot of it is also that, what you made out of it. I mean, obviously, you didn't invest in something and it turned overnight. You invested in it. You had to eventually, step in and run it. Then it took 8 years, 9 years from there to get it to the place. You had 97% attrition. So it's both can be true, right? The thing could be a really, non-saleable, non-investable company when you come in, but then you can, obviously you made it into something. It wouldn't have gotten there without significant work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's one of those situations where I bought the car without looking under the hood.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I looked under the hood and I was like, wait a second, this is going to be a lot of work, but it was worth it at the end. Fortunately, a very good business model when you strip everything else away, and very good. We built a great team. At the end of the day, that's it, right? Every company is made up of people.
Yeah.
So you're not going to succeed without great people.
Yeah.
That took me a long time to figure out.
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes. If you want the best team, you have to pay them the best.
So we won't spend a lot more time on that other business, but it's interesting because that was a licensing business, right? And licensing is a type of deal. And I think it's frankly an underutilized type of deal. And obviously, there are certain industries in which it's a regular thing, right? But there's also, I've given this example on the podcast before. Most speakers, for example, basically get paid to speak, right? To be on stage or whatever. And, there are a couple of speakers I know that really, they create curriculum, they license content. Sure, they deliver it, but then they may do a train the trainer or whatever. But even the people who do train the trainers, they often just get paid for that and that's it, right? some people in that industry, very few, have content that anybody who's using it within companies has to license every year and pay a licensing fee on, right? But that's not your business. But my point is that I think licensing is an underutilized type of deal. So just talk a little bit about the licensing that company did, the model on that, what it did.
Sure. So to make it understandable or relatable to most of the DealQuest listeners, if anybody out there has a child who was in their school play or musical, maybe they did a version of Annie, Grease, or The Wizard of Oz. Well, that's intellectual property. You can't just go ahead and perform that on stage, even if it's free, in front of other people. You can't perform something in front of other people without getting the rights from the rights holder to perform it in front of other people.
Right.
If you did, that's theft. And just the same way you can't show a movie in front of other people or steal somebody's song or refilm, Mission Impossible 3. Good luck doing that, but you just can't do it. And so we license the right to perform plays and musicals on stage in the United States and worldwide. At the time that I took the business over, there were probably maybe 6 major licensing companies. And when I say major, it was very small, just 6 ones that were prominent. And when I left, there might have been 3, because one large music licensing company ended up buying a bunch of them, including us. So that's an incredibly large music licensing company, and they're doing a great job. They did a great job doing the roll-up, and not everything worked out like I wanted it to. However, and I learned a lot of lessons, a lot of very difficult lessons, but in the end, it was a great event for me, and I hope that people get to sell their businesses. Those who want to sell their businesses, I hope they get to sell their businesses. It's an incredible experience. It provides a certain level of financial flexibility that people they hopefully they've earned over the years.
So it sounds like, just from the little I know, right, based upon what we just talked about and a quick pre-call of my deal experience, I'm thinking, okay, so what are some of the factors that made this company saleable, right? A nice multiple, right? And so far what I've heard is, okay, first of all, obviously you took it from a sleepy family company, which, by the way, I'm not saying this is the best, but like one of the great things about licensing is that you can sort of get away with that for a little while, right? Because the money
Decades.
at least on existing licenses continues to flow in. Right now, at some point, maybe you lose licenses if you're not, renewing them, if you're not getting new properties, whatever. But there is, this level of passive income, which is a term that when people say it's never really fully passive, but like you can skate, let's just say, for a while, and before, unlike other businesses where, like, if you're a law firm and you're billing by the hour, if you don't have people who bill hours, no money comes in, right? But obviously, that's not dynamic. But that is also one of the factors that make it an attractive business, right? When you have recurring revenue of any type, whether it's subscription, whether it's licensing, whether it's whatever, right? That's a factor. You also said you obviously professionalize management and change team to a dynamic team, and you already stressed the value of team, right? So that was obviously there. And then you also mentioned that you had a roll-up buyer, right? Which is, also very often, and I don't know if this is the case here, but it wouldn't surprise me, very often roll-ups are willing to pay higher than what the other buyers are willing to pay, what the market normally is, in part because they're playing a multiple arbitrage game sometimes, right? They figure if the market is, I'm making up numbers, right? The market's a 5x EBITDA for a certain business, they'll pay an 8 because they think they can sell it at a 12 or a 14 or a 16 later. And often there's a rollover equity piece where the part of the structure is they say, hey, you'll get a second bite of the apple at the higher multiple. So you don't have to reveal anything confidential, but to the extent that those factors were there, we just think for you to confirm that or not. And then also, were there any other factors that I have not identified from the outside here that made that business attractive, to that buyer?
Sure. So another one that I can't take credit for, I have to credit my CFO, was that as soon as I got there, we switched from cash accounting to accrual-based GAAP accounting. So when we were selling our business, the buyer had more faith in those numbers.
Yeah.
It was more credible. It was more representative of our actual business. Now, why did we didn't do that because we thought we were going to sell the company. We did that because we want to have a better understanding of our business, and there were some other reasons to do it. But it's something that buyers are looking for, is clarity on the financials, and the way to do that, if possible, if it works for your business, is to move to accrual-based accounting. Another reason is, let me see here. You said, talking about the team,
Yeah.
all
Team.
that. Oh,
Become
so
revenue.
I hate putting out fires. And when I was running the company, I hated when we made mistakes. I hate apologizing to clients when we make the same mistakes over and over. Like, I just hate that stuff. And I was not afraid to put money into the company. So we actually, and good timing, we actually moved to cloud-based software programs, best in class tech stack. And let's see, I took over that company in 2011. It was in New York City. You may not remember this, but in 2012, we had Superstorm Sandy, which wiped out
I remember it
electricity.
well. I was in New York at that time.
Okay, yeah. Light wiped out electricity south of 33rd Street. Our office was on 24th Street, and so we didn't have electricity for a week. But fortunately for us, just good, as I said, luck and perspiration. Fortunately for us, 2 weeks beforehand, we'd finalized our licensing software, and all of our licensing agents, we had 20 of them, were able to work from home.
Wow.
And our accountants were able to work from home. So we were completely remote. 2012, we were so ready for COVID that we didn't even, I mean, wasn't even a gleam in the universe at that time. But we were ready. We were fully remote. And the reason I did that was not because I thought we would need to be remote. I didn't do it because I thought it would lead to a higher valuation. I did it because it just made our business tighter, ultimately more profitable,
Yes.
easier, more enjoyable to run.
Yes.
I figured that our prospective clients, would appreciate that. And, they weren't that into it. Most of our clients were artists, writers, and they were like, okay, that's cool. But boy, we were proud and we were excited. And the agents that we worked with were very happy about it because we didn't make mistakes. We just didn't make mistakes. So why did that lead to a higher valuation? Because when we sold our business, first of all, we were able to present our entire business on a sheet of infographics explaining how we had reduced our licensing time from over 4 weeks on average per license to under 4 hours per
Wow.
license.
Wow.
We were able to explain the workflows and provide data behind all of it. We were data forward, and that provided such great clarity into our business for the buyers that they had great confidence in our business. Probably the most important thing was they were able to take our entire tech stack and adopt it to their business, which was 10 times bigger, 10 times more revenue, but use our tech stack as the basis of their future growth.
Huge value.
That was incredibly valuable to them. They had confidence in us, and they got this incredibly well-built, I guess, technology infrastructure.
Wow. It's interesting because obviously you can look at that, just the value of having that technology infrastructure. But something struck me because many years ago, and I've mentioned this a couple of times over the years in the podcast, but many years ago, and it's always frustrating me that I don't remember who these folks were because I'd love to credit them. I was at some course, some business like retreat course thing. And it was at one of Harv Becker's courses. And he brought these guys in that was systemizing folks. And this is AI, forget about it. It was like, this was years ago. And what they said was something you actually applied. They said, when you have any issue, challenge, or frustration that comes up repeatedly in your business, ask this question: what fully implemented system do I not have in place that would resolve this? Right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you did, right? You said you got frustrated by the mistakes that were being, and you may not have asked that exact question, maybe you did, but the point is you implemented a system. Now, a system could be, a lot of times these days it's technology related, but a system doesn't have to be, It could be an operating procedure. It could be, whatever it is, right? That's such a great question to ask, because not only does it avoid the mistakes, but it does create efficiencies, because those things that you repeatedly have an issue, a challenge, a problem, a mistake on are telling you something, right? There's something missing in your system, and in your company. And I think the mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is that they default to the person or the talent. Like they think, oh, this person made the mistake. It's them. Maybe I have to replace the person. Now, sometimes that's true, but just having that filter to at least ask that question about what fully implemented system do I not have in place that would resolve this, or that, would prevent this, I think is a huge filter that is really valuable. And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yes. So those digital systems, and then of course our analog systems, which is our processes and procedures. Maybe that's the last element that I'd like to highlight of something that makes a business transferable, is having written processes and procedures, having them updated on a regular basis. We did that. We had a book, and when the buyer bought our business, we handed them the book and said, this is how our entire business runs.
Yeah.
And anybody can come in, they'll understand 95% of the job just by reading this book. And we did that not because we thought we were going to sell, but just for redundancy purposes. If somebody left, somebody else could step in, understand the job, and get most of it done.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to coreycupfer.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic, deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. Yeah, what's fascinating is that, and there's a lot out there on this, but I think it's so important to keep in mind. One thing is that obviously businesses are more valuable if they're not dependent upon any particular person or people, right? The more systems you have in place, the more it's documented, the more it's, right, exactly what you said, the less dependent it is on, on people. All right. So that makes your company more valuable, more transferable. So that's it. That's a huge thing. And the other thing you said is we didn't, like in several things that you talked about, we didn't do it because, right? What that really underlies is this, that's something that I believe, which is that everything you should be doing, and we'll get into this a little more detail a little later when we talk about what you're doing for clients now, right? But everything that is a great practice to make your company more valuable, more transferable, right? Have higher enterprise value, be more attractive to buyers, is actually all the stuff that actually makes your business run way better and way more profitably and way more successfully, and less burden on the founders and owners in between that point, or if you never sell it, right? It's really, they're really aligned, and I see you nodding your head, and I'll have you speak to that a little later. But before we get there, I want to, well, first of all, just so people have context, what were you doing before you became CEO of this company? Because like at first you were, it sounds like a minority investor of this big group because your mom said, hey, put some money into this thing. And then, 8 years later, you become CEO. What were you doing before that?
Something completely unrelated. I was actually working in private equity. And before that, I worked at investment banks in the capital markets side, selling investment ideas to hedge funds and investment advisors. So I had always been on the financial side and always, I guess, attuned to company financials and data driven.
Yeah.
And I had also just received my MBA, but that doesn't necessarily teach you how to run a company. It just kind of gives you a good rounded education on all elements of what is in a company. But what the company needed when I stepped in was somebody who was business minded. It was full of a bunch of people who were so passionate about theater and knew the theater very well and could talk to producers, whether they were drama teachers at elementary schools or producing big tours across Asia. They could talk to producers about the shows, but what it really needed was somebody who had some vision of how to turn this into a profitable organization, and also just have some interest in the data insights or the insights you could extract from the data.
Yeah. Okay. So great. So it sort of, makes some sense in terms of what you brought to the table, although listen, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, because just because you've been on the financial analytics side or investment side or PE side or, whatever, I mean, what it takes to be a CEO and actually be an operator are different, and not everybody who transfers over is successful. So,
Yeah, and I was a CEO operator. I wasn't a CEO salesperson.
yeah.
Really, that I hired people to be the face of the company. I couldn't speak that language. I didn't understand. I didn't have the same history or passion for theater that some of these other people did. And so understanding your weakness, is really important. I'd go to all the events and people would talk to me about it, and they wanted to get to know me because I was the CEO. But really, my strength was being the operator. And I was one of those people who really looked at the org chart upside down, where I was just there to support the rest of the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. All right. So before we get to what you're doing now, and how everything you did before informs it and how you help people, I want to talk about a very important period, because it's something that you told me you'd be willing to share, authentically and deeply, and it's a personal experience, and also because it's something that I've been, committed to raising on this podcast. So, a lot of people think, oh, wow, sounds amazing. Nate had a great exit, built his company. He's had a charmed life. Look at him, and made this little investment his mom told him to make, suddenly took over the company. Not that you didn't work hard. Obviously you worked hard. You built something great. You exited it for significant, at high multiples to a buyer, for all these things you did. And life's going to be great. And this is something that Dave Hirsch, who I had as a guest on the podcast, has referred to as what we're about to talk about as the smallest violin problem, right? It's the thing that almost nobody can relate to, because if they hear you exited, for 10 or 20 or 40 or 100 million, whatever, right? Like any kind of numbers that's beyond what they could possibly ever think, they think what could be wrong with life, right? So tell us what happened after you exited the company.
So there's a term that was coined by some South African researchers who followed CEOs for a period and followed them after the CEOs had either sold their businesses or had left their businesses, had retired, and then were in this period between leaving that business and then finding their next thing, their next purpose in life. And that the term is called the liminal period.
Mhm.
And it's a period, I think liminal means between two periods, actually. It's a period marked by feelings of worthlessness, confusion, uncertainty, depression. I certainly felt that. I felt that for probably 3 or 4 years. There was probably a section of on and off, maybe 4 months at a time, and then it would go away, where I just wouldn't sleep. I mean, I would sleep because I was completely exhausted, but it was a restless sleep for maybe like 3 hours or 4 hours a night, and just so much anxiety and so much just very difficult time. And it was I really, look, I had all this money in the bank, right? It's the smallest violin. I had all this money in the bank, but I felt completely worthless. And I was talking to a business coach maybe a year ago, and he said it's it's a feeling of not being relevant anymore. And so it's a big challenge. There's so many things that go into it. Feeling of not being relevant anymore. You go from running a company where people look to your decisions, and your decisions are final and they have impact, and you can craft things into your vision. Your days are filled with feeling important, and maybe even being important. I don't know. Definitely feeling important. And then all of a sudden, nobody wants to talk to you. Monday, after you sell your business on Monday. Tuesday, nobody wants to talk to you. They've already dismissed you. You are gone. And so dealing with that. The other thing is, of course, I spent a lot of effort, a lot of sleepless nights also building this company. And Oh my goodness. I mean, there are probably a lot of CEOs listening to this podcast and a lot of advisors, and and maybe if there's somebody here who doesn't know any CEOs, ask them how many sleepless nights they have every year, and they will tell you it's probably a quarter to a half of their year. It is just incredibly difficult. Luckily, by the end, right, we had so many great systems, those sleepless nights became fewer and fewer, but you put so much effort into it. It's like having another child. Now I have two children, 5 and 3, and obviously it's not the same as a human life, but the effort that you put into it and how consuming it is. I talk a lot about purpose, community, and identity. My business coach talked to me about that years after I sold my business, and he saw how much I was struggling through this liminal period, and he said, it's really about purpose, community, and health. But we'll just go into it a little bit. Purpose. When I was running my company, I had a purpose, and that purpose was to support my team every day, and it was to support our clients. I felt I was giving myself to them, trying to make their lives better, and that made me feel really good. If I wasn't there, their lives wouldn't be as good in my mind, of course. So that was purpose. And then community, we had our community, and my community was the team and the other people in the industry, and that was a great community. I spent a lot of time with them. And then my identity, when I would go to parties, people would say, "What do you do?" I'd say, "I'm the CEO." It definitely is a stroke for the ego, a stroke to the ego. And all of that is gone Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, all of that is gone. And you don't have purpose, and you don't have community, you don't have identity. And going to health, when my coach told me about health, what he was talking about was physical and mental health. And mental health, one of the things that is very difficult for small business CEOs, and we were a mid-market business with 100 employees, mid 8 figures in revenue. So we were pretty big, but I wasn't making a ton of money. Something that is very difficult to get used to is you don't have income anymore. Like, you used to live off of your income. And so that was a mental security. Now, Tuesday morning comes around, you can't expect to get that bi-weekly check that's going to cover your expenses. Now, all of a sudden, all that money is coming out of this pile of money that you don't really know what it means to have a pile of money. And you don't know how long it's going to last. And you don't know how and when you can spend it. And so that is like a big shock, and that safety. So you don't feel safe or secure.
And,
It's
and
very
this is
difficult.
interesting because I just want to hop in here because I've heard CEOs talk about this even when they understand the math. Like, if they do the math on the returns on what they have in there, right, it more than supports their lifestyle, and often even beyond that. But the math doesn't convince them on an emotional, energetic, whatever you want to call it, psychological level. They still feel insecure because they're so used to having that check come in.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that I was going to be living out of the back of my car with my family in 10 years. I mean, even though I did the math 100 times, and
Yeah.
I am an expert in this, it's just shocking. It's very jarring. It's just a big transition from one thing to another. And, a friend of mine said, after he saw me and I was going through this, he said, "Nate, it seems like you're going through postpartum depression." Obviously, when people say postpartum depression, they think of, mother having a child. They are going through something very similar. Of course, it's on a different scale, different emotions, whatnot. But I could say that that liminal period is probably present in any major event in your life, whether you are selling a company, or you just had a child, or you are retiring, or your kids move out of the house.
Yeah.
Any major where you have to readjust your life, and you have to find new purpose, new community, new health, new identity. I'm going to go back to purpose for a second too, because I think this will really speak to your audience. And what I've found is, a lot of people say, "Oh, go find a purpose." Well, it's not that easy, right? go find a purpose. All right, well, what's that mean? What I have found, and I alluded to this earlier, is that purpose, you will feel that you have a purpose when you find something that you feel you are relevant to others. You are somehow improving the lives of others.
Yeah.
Now, those others could be people in need, right? Need of resources, food, money, maybe information, maybe just connection, human connection, just people in need, and you're providing them with something. It could be for money. You could be working for free. You could be being paid for it. They could be wealthy. They could be poor. Whatever it is, where you feel that because you exist, you are making their lives better. That is when you will feel like you have a purpose. And so that speaks to me, because now I feel like I found my purpose after, let's see, it's 2026. I started doing this in 2023. So like 4 or 5 years after I sold my business, I found a purpose again. And that really is to support entrepreneurs and executives who are building businesses and who are transitioning into their next chapters. I feel like I can help them because I've been in those shoes, and I can provide them with best practices. I can help them avoid the mistakes that I made. And that makes me feel so good. Having conversations like this, knowing that somebody is going to benefit from this, makes me feel really good. And that is my purpose.
Love that. So let's use that as an access point to talk about what you do now. Because listen, people, we mentioned in your bio up front, like what you do, and in terms of that, consulting and financial planning and exit planning and all that kind of stuff. Like anybody who's listening to this can say, "Oh, I can see how he could add value, right? He could add value. He knows how to grow, professionalize, systemize, build team, create a company, right? That all creates enterprise value, whatever. So he's got that piece. Obviously comes from a financial, background, understands numbers, right? Right. That's valuable. Okay, he sold a company, so he's gone through that process. The actual process of selling a company, that's valuable. So we can talk a little bit more about all that, but I want to access it through this piece that we're talking about now, because I think that, not that all that other stuff is a commodity anyway, obviously it's super valuable, but there are more other people who bring that to the table in various ways. So I guess my question for you is, what did you learn in this liminal period in terms of everything that happened there and then coming out of it and finding your purpose? And how did that have you look at maybe things you could have done differently to be better prepared? And then how does that lead into how you support, entrepreneurs in their exit, to at least reduce, or temper, if not eliminate, the liminal periods for them?
So Corey, I do a quarterly business exit planning webinar workshop. My next one is May 12th. My last one was February 10th. I do it on a quarterly basis, so somebody listening to this a year from now can know that I have one coming up.
Yeah.
In that workshop, I talk about purpose and community and health, and I have people identify their goals. One of the big things is when you are exit planning, or when you are running a business, you are always trying to identify your business goals. What do we want to do as a business? What are we going to do? What's our 90-day sprint? What are our 1-year goals? What are our 5-year goals? Well, what about you personally?
Yeah.
As a business owner? What are your goals? What are the goals of your family? What do you want out of this business? So really understanding your goals. And then we talk about the whole personal well-being aspect, community, purpose, health, and understanding what your goals are in those 3 elements. We call them your post-exit goals, because you're thinking, all right, well, once I sell my business, then I'm going to start going to the gym, and then I'm going to start spending more time with my family. Well, here's the thing. There was a Dutch study that found that there's a direct correlation between an entrepreneur's personal well-being and the success of their company, where personal well-being was a greater predictor of success than the other way around. So the twist is, if you want a more successful company today, start prioritizing personal well-being. Start identifying your purpose. Now, that purpose could be your business, and that is fine. But it might also behoove you to also look for things that you can do outside of your business that also give you those same feelings of relevance. It only makes you stronger. start searching for community. Of course, your business, those people that work for you or with you, that is your community. But start looking for people outside of that community who can support you and be there for when you do sell your business or when you do retire. Because those people who are involved in your business, again, Tuesday, for the most part, they're going to forget you ever existed. And then, of course, health. Really, health is foundational. If you are not in good health, both physically and mentally, nothing else matters, right? I think in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, health is the very bottom, at the base layer, saying this is the most important thing that you have. So we talk a lot about that. Oh, and by the way, I finished the first draft of my book too, which is a workbook that is going to kind of guide business owners through the exit process. I'll send you a copy when I get it published. Yeah, really understanding your goals and then understanding the importance of personal well-being and implementing that personal well-being before you sell your business, because not only are you going to have a more fulfilling life, but you're also going to have a more profitable company. And guess what? More profitable companies sell for more money.
Love that. So before I get to my final two questions as we come to time, give us a little more about who do you work with? Who's the ideal client in terms of whether it's size, whether it's stage, whether it's, things like that.
Yeah, look, my purpose is supporting the personal and financial well-being of entrepreneurs and executives. I love it. I love talking about it. I geek out about it. I really kind of dig into the tax perspective and the asset protection perspective. A lot of people think of wealth managers. They think, oh, well, they're going to invest my money for me. Well, that's one leg of the stool. The other really important aspects of it are tax strategy and asset protection, especially for business owners, because they typically do not have a lot of investable assets. It is good to diversify your wealth because for the most part, business owners have their wealth concentrated in their business, which is risky. But tax strategy, wealth preservation, so important. And I love talking to business owners about that all day long. I geek out on it. I love to find how we can use the current tax code to support a business owner and optimize their personal finances. And then, of course, the mental and emotional support and being there. I think any advisor, whether it's an M&A advisor or a financial advisor or a tax CPA, is going to say, look, 25% of my job is being this professional, and the other 75% is being a therapist. And I agree with that. Fortunately for me, I have walked in the business owner's shoes. I know the challenges that they face, and I can empathize with them because I've been there. Or wait, is it sympathize? I think I can sympathize because I've been there. That's my thing, And so any stage of their business journey is when I enjoy working with them. So the beginning, they probably don't have a lot of assets. But even if somebody's not going to be my ideal client, I'm happy to talk to them and happy to share because it's my purpose, supporting their professional and personal well-being. I want to make sure that every business owner is prepared to go through a transaction and not make the mistakes that I made.
Love that. Love that. So if people want to find out more about you and your current life and your company and how to, get supported by you, where do they go?
Obviously, LinkedIn is the yellow pages of the business world. I'm super easy to find. LinkedIn, I'm Nate Collins, Raymond James. I'm the only Nate Collins at Raymond James. I think right now I look just like this. And I think actually my handle is Nate-Collins. So super easy. Or there's this thing called Google, Nate Collins, Raymond James. I come up. Or my email address is nate.collins@raymondjames.com. So all those ways, very easy to find me. I'd love to invite everybody, whether you are a business owner or an advisor of some sort, to come and listen to my business exit planning workshop, which I do on a quarterly basis. Very exciting. This May 12th, we have Common Trust is going to participate. Common Trust is an expert advisor in employee ownership trusts, which are kind of a new alternative to ESOPs. So listeners are going to learn a little bit about that. And in this workshop, it's very interactive. It's identifying goals. And I really talk more about my personal journey. It's all based on my personal journey. So although there are other advisors who do exit planning too, none of them are going to do it like me because they don't have my story. So for better or for worse, I think it's for better. It was a great experience.
I definitely think it's for better, especially because you've gone through the gamut of it, and you're willing to share it honestly, and hopefully save folks from making some of those same mistakes and get them better prepared. So that's why I'm excited to have you on. My final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for people from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Yeah, so I'd say freedom is the ability to make choices. And there are a number of things that contribute to that. Obviously, living in a great country that provides you that flexibility, and obviously the ability to start your own business and be your own boss. And some days you don't want that. You do not want to have those choices or to make those decisions. But for the most part, it's incredibly fulfilling and good. It's health and wealth, and your health is your wealth. Being healthy, you have choices. Having enough money to put food on the table, you have choices. And so that's what I'd define as freedom.
Love that. Nate Collins, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Corey, thank you so much. It was fantastic, and I really appreciate the entire team at DealQuest.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.